Good morning, everybody. I have to say I really liked the last presentation and also the need to really revitalize the water, because the water is one of the most important values for the city and has a lot of aspects, and maybe also a kind of a learning center about water. All the dimensions of water could help to create the conscious for that. But I would like to speak a little bit about another issue, about industrial areas. Maybe you can go to the next. Could you please? Yes, thanks. I would like to speak about the transformation of industrial areas. I think what we learned is that Bishkek has really history in big industrial areas, and they are vacant partly, and that is not really just in Bishkek the case. That is overall on the world. It is in Amsterdam, it's in London, everywhere. The technique is changing, there are new trends, and former industrial areas have to be renewed in a way. We have been asked by the London Authority, by the Metropolitan Authority, development agency from London, to find out the principles for two issues: to densify the area and to try to mix industrial areas with other functions. So this was a case study. These are 5 industrial areas in London. You see on the bottom line the Thames River, and that was near to the Olympic Games, which have been here, industrial areas which can take profit out of the Olympic Games. And we had to identify, they asked us to identify principles for densifying and increasing the mix. Yes, the next please. These are the main objectives. Okay, next please. So what we did is we thought about the trends in industry, about what are the constraints. We tried to understand the law and how it works in London. That means it's always so that in Germany there are other type of laws than in the Netherlands or in England and in Kyrgyzstan. So it's quite important also to try to understand the local situation about what's going on. So we had a lot of interviews in London, but also international, with urban development experts related who used to work with the industrial areas. And I want to show just 2 things, some samples which can help to densify or which could help to mix. So examples on the one hand side and some principles, urban design principles on the other side. Okay, next please. So this is a whole row of principles and precedents we did. I made a selection, yes, next please. I just to show some of them because we have not such a lot of time. What we did is we indicated for each of the samples and principles on which the sample is relevant. Does it show, is it a good sample for the mix, or is it a good sample for intensifying? That is the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, is the sample related to which scale? Does it? There's some change in the presentation. Okay, so here. Good. Next one. Yes, and on the left-hand side, maybe one back. On the left-hand side, you see different kind of scales, about the low scale, medium scale, and bigger scale. On which scale the example is relevant. Yes, please. Yeah, this is about the samples. One of the first principles is about the open development and the spatial framework. You already talked about the necessity to combine the industrial areas with the surrounding, but you need a kind of grid system, a street system, a pattern, so that it can be combined with the surrounding. But also part of that is to think about the future of that area. What kind of programmatical future could it have, and what are the main perspectives and main issues on long term? So this is quite relevant. You can see that on the bottom line, on the very high level of the area as a total. You need that kind of pattern just to make it part of the city, of the fabric of the city. Yes, next please. Here we have some samples of that in Barcelona or in Amsterdam or in Toronto, in Bishkek, doesn't matter. In fact, these principles are quite generic, but they always have a kind of local interpretation and a local size and a local history, of course. But in general, it's important to reorganize the accessibility of these areas in a good way and try to make the former industrial areas part of the city and not just isolated enclaves. Yes. The second principle I want to show, I have to think about the translation, the English word for that. This is about stacking. Instead of just having one level of function, you can think about a stacking of different programs in one building. Of course, that is not overall possible. You have to look where it is suitable and where not. And here we have some examples also of buildings I will explain later on, which with the diversity of functions. For instance, the building on the bottom line to the right is a former terminal building of a seagoing vessel company to South America. Later on, it became a supermarket, and now these are offices, and there's a museum inside. So this building is quite flexible. It's about the flexibility of the building. They can have different life in different programs during the life. And I think investment, also for investors, it's a good advice, I think, to invest in building types which are quite flexible for the future, because the industry and also the technology is changing. And if you can invest in building types which can be used for different purposes, then you have a better, more efficient investment. Yes? This is about stacking different functions in one level. Yes. You can see here some of that samples. Automobile garage of Citroën on the left bottom side with some parking on top of it, for instance. Instead of making all functions next and beside to each other, just try to concentrate what is possible to concentrate. Yes. What is also already said is the need of making meeting points. Even in the industrial areas, I mean, there are people working the whole day in future, maybe not at the very moment, and so they are there for a big part of their life, in fact. And it's not just working there, but it's also lunchtime, and after lunch maybe they want to meet something, and it's nice to have also some cafes or restaurants or meeting point of kindergartens and that kind of provisions there. Maybe at corner places, etc. This, I think I cannot read that. Let's go to the next one, I would say. This is about the combination of functions which normally are impossible to combine in one building. Let me say housing on the one hand side and a waste depot on the other side. Normally the waste depot would be at the very corner of the city, outside of the city, the border of the city, but here on the left hand side it's one building where housing and waste depot are combined in one building. That demands, in fact, a separation of the function, separate accessibility for the waste depot. You see that, so there is a kind of bottom socle of 10 meters, and on top of the bottom, the housing is starting. And in fact, these are two separate systems, two kinds of logistic systems which are separately but combined in one building. Yes, it is made in the in the 80s in London, it's realized. Yeah? And this is about housing in an industrial area. You can imagine sometimes industry and housing that doesn't fit in. If you want to invest in housing in an industrial area, you are in the middle of industry. So it's quite important or to organize a kind of critical mass of housing of the one hand side, or to think about a typology for the housing where the influence, maybe the negative impact of industry is not too obvious. You can create your own oasis. Maybe that could be one of them. But sometimes industry can also be spectacular for housing, and even in Hamburg, but also in Amsterdam, in other cities. There are first movements to go with offices, with housing, very close to the industrial areas, because it's a little bit different, and young people, young entrepreneurs, they like that kind of relationship. Here on the right-hand side, bottom, this is in Hamburg, along the harbor, and it's opposite to a container terminal, where now a restaurant, offices, and also houses are. And people like it very much to be close to the industrial areas. And they accept also some constraints, because some of the people like that kind of working and that kind of environment. Yes, next please. And this is about the scale on which the mix should be organized. You could say, if this is the city of Bishkek, you could say, okay, we make a mix by dividing the city in 4 parts, like a pizza, quattro stagione, and say here is housing and here is industry, etc. What we say, that is not the scale for organizing the mix. The mix should be organized on a much lower level. In fact, on the level of a block. That is the human scale on which it can help also to create atmosphere, which is so important, also creating the atmosphere. Yes? In a new kind of industrial master plans, on the left-hand side, that is a master plan for the transformation of a former industrial area for mixed use, industry and housing in Amsterdam. So they try to organize the mix on the block level, on the block. So not just here housing and 1 kilometer further the industry, but on the level of the block, if possible. Yes. So now I told a little bit about some examples. I already mentioned this former terminal, but there are a lot of buildings which have a second life use, a third life use, a fourth generation of use, and that's to invest in making flexible building is a good investment for the city, is a good investment for the investors, in fact. Yeah. So this just gives an example of how it is used now, and 20 years ago it has been used in totally different, but that is a building from 1953, and at the very beginning it was a terminal for sea-going vessels. So there are different lives in one building through the time, but for that you need some characteristics in the building, about the building height, about the flexibility for use, about the accessibility, and so forth. Not just making one building for one purpose, but more flexible. Yes. Next, please. This is in the area I told also yesterday, one of the samples I told you, where a new building, a kind of trade building, is made with waste depot vehicles of the municipality in the ground level, with headquarters of newspapers on top of it. So that kind of mix was quite new also for Amsterdam. Yes. So here are the different functions of the building, but there's also a restaurant. There are little offices for starting entrepreneurs. So there is a kind of vibrant combination of different activities here. Here again, the building I showed earlier, the combination of waste depot in the ground level and the housing on top level. you see the building has one type of material to the outside, to the street, and that is brick. So the brick is combining, in fact, in visual terms and material terms, the different kind of functions which normally cannot be combined, but here they really tried to combine things, just in order also to, and can you go? Yeah, this is interesting, because here you can see that they organized a level of 10 meters just for the waste depot and made a break in the building and organized the housing on top of it. And these are two different kind of systems which are separated in terms of accessibility, but they are combined in one block, in fact. And this is a kind of new approach to try to combine different kind of activities in one building. Yeah, next please. And this is about a new type of flexible building. So there was an architect and a developer that tried to find out a new typology. This has been a prototype in an area in Amsterdam, in a former harbor area. And this is quite interesting because it's for offices, in fact, but it's based on an industrial prefab system. Prefab system for, so it's a kind of cheap preparation and making of the construction, but the ceilings of the floors are quite high. There's 3.50 meters until 4 meters high, so quite flexible floors. What you also can see is, can you go back, please? Yes. But you also can see that on the street, here in front, this is the street, the building has a very clear street orientation. That means it's participating in the street. There are balconies of 60 meters long on all floors to the street. So all the employees who are working there, they can go smoking there or having a view to, or having a meeting outside on the balcony. And at the same time, the balcony and the front line makes that the building and the street are coming in a kind of relationship. And it is quite important to organize some rules, in fact, for, on the one hand side, the investment for flexible buildings, but also then you're talking about money, but at the same time the building is participating in the street, then you're talking about quality. It's always about the combination of money and quality. And so the rules should organize both aspects, yes? And nowadays, this building has been a kind of example for future, and a lot of investors saw that kind of improvements and advantages. And nowadays, there are a lot of buildings a little bit like that in that area. There are more than, I think, 15 of these buildings built. Different in size, but with the same characteristics of flexibility and street orientation. Yeah. Another sample in London about the combination of a supermarket with the housing, but also with a library and a supermarket. So in front of the supermarket normally has a kind of closed front to the street, and it is quite ugly, you could say. So the supermarket doesn't participate in the life of the street. What they did here, it's a library and a kindergarten in front of the supermarket towards the street, and on top of the hall, it's housing. So this is a way how you could combine different functions, and also to avoid that the supermarket is bringing an ugly facade for 30 meters along the streets. Yeah. Well, maybe not so interesting, that kind of. That is a quite interesting example from Toronto. That has been in former times an industrial area which was not so good in function anymore. It was a former textile area, and the whole textile industry went to India and that kind of countries. And so they had a dream for this area, which has been an industrial area and very close to the downtown center, that so some urban designers thought, oh, we can make a wonderful area out of that. And they organized a lot of rules for densifying the area and mixer the area and corners and all kind of that. And they thought, okay, we hope that it will be wonderful. What happened? Nothing happened, because the gap between the dream of the urban designers and the developers about how to develop, how to invest in the area. The gap was too big. So what did they do? They said, okay, we have to go back to reality, just kill the rules and say you can come up with initiatives. Just to organize activities, building and construction activities in the area for the first 2 years. Once the construction activities began to start, in the eyes of the designers, some mistakes happened, but at the same time the ground value came up, and they organized a first generation of rules, because now the ground value came up and a lot of interest from the market has been there, and they organized the first generation of rule. And after 5 years later, the ground value came up for more and more, and they organized a second generation of rules, and a third. So what is this? This is a kind of dynamic set of rules in the same area, and it is a sophisticated game how to play with money for the investors and the quality. It's always a balance, to find the right balance, because the investor, the developer, wants to make profit. That is normal. And the city and the citizens, they want to have quality. But how to find the balance in the area? So they found out a way how to upgrade the area step by step through the time. Very interesting for me as experience. And now, after 20 years later, the area is one of the most outstanding areas for young entrepreneurs, for media companies, and all that kind of stuff. If you have a meeting in Toronto, I'm sure for 50% it will be in that area. Yeah, I will come to the end. There are some other samples which are a little bit comparable, I would say, about the need of a spatial framework, about the flexibility, about how to integrate the area in the fabric of the city. Yes, please. This is in Amsterdam, ongoing process, yes. Next, please. And these are some strategical conclusions out of that, because on the one hand side you have examples, you have principles which are more generic, but at the same time you need the understanding of the management, the organization, financing, and so forth. And this is just a little summary of that. So we made a booklet of that, but I want to stop here. Thank you very much.